you think too much. And when you think too much, you make yourself heavy. And when you make yourself heavy, you cannot fly. We're living in a very mega limited reality when we try to function from our 3D analysis analytical mind. That keeps us trapped in our 3D reality. And what we want is we want to merge with all that is Anima Mundi. And the way to do that is to humble ourselves, to let go, less attachment, less ego, and more opening our heart and more loving. Because when we get into our logic, we start analyzing the world as opposed to observing the world. And the merging is in the observation, not the analysis. Somehow a curtain got pulled open and he was standing on the other side of the curtain. And he said to me very poignantly, "See, I told you, death is an illusion. Nothing dies. It is not real." You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled, Who is Don Javier, the Shaman? Now, I don't know why I had never thought about this in the past, because I know in every episode or every couple of episodes when I talk about him, it becomes repetitive for me. And I'm sure for many of you listening for any amount of time, you're like, why does he keep saying he's Don Javier, the Shaman, his brother-in-law? And so I don't know why a long time ago, I didn't realize that I should just do one episode and say, refer to the episode. So in this episode, I want to talk to you and share about who Don Javier is, how I know him, and I want to share his background and how he became a shaman. So if you'd like to learn more about the person, the being, the shaman, I've been referencing for many, many hundreds of episodes now, keep listening. So who is Don Javier, the shaman? And as I said in the intro, I don't know why it never dawned on me until now to create this episode. I mean, I should have done it in the first 5 episodes and I didn't. Oh well, you live and learn. But anyway, going forward, if you listen for any amount of time, I'm going to share things here I've not shared before. But if you're listening in the future and you might wonder, I'm going to keep referring people back to this episode by the number. So let me dig in here and share a little bit about my story. And I think part of the reason I haven't shared this before is because in all the work that I do, I'm literally more concerned about what you get from the work. And I want to make it about you, not about me. So I tend to literally just not talk about myself. And I found that I started thinking that maybe I'm not doing you guys a service by not sharing more with you guys about how I came to know him, how I work with him, what it looks like to work with him, the journeys that I've been on with him, how he became a shaman, and etc. So in this episode, I'll move faster in some places, slower in others, but I'll share that with you. So I want to go back here. I think I might have shared it before, maybe not, but I was adopted within the immediate family. And when I was 25, my mom said, I want to, you're adopted and I want to introduce you to your mother, because my adoptive mother and biological mother were childhood friends, an extended family, but also friends. And when my biological mother had me, she couldn't keep me. She already had 4 kids, I believe, 5, I don't know. Anyway, she couldn't keep me. And so my adoptive parents didn't believe they could conceive. And so they wanted to adopt me. And they took care of, financially, they helped my biological mother out while she was pregnant. And then the night I was born, my biological mother turned me over to my adoptive mother. And she said, please never tell him about this. And my adoptive mother said, well, I'll tell him when he's 25, he has a right to know. At 25, my mom told me about my biological mother. And at that point, I was really close to my adoptive mother, and I had no desire to meet my biological mother. I had no desire. I didn't see any reason to. Why? I already had a mom. I didn't need a second mom in my 25-year-old thinking. I wasn't even curious about it. I didn't care about it. I wasn't angry, nothing. I just had no desire. So at 25, my mom said, I want to introduce you to your mom. She got back in touch with my mom, and they talked quite a bit for the next 5 years. I didn't do anything for 5 years. And 5 years later, when I was 30, I had to go to Dallas on business. I lived in Atlanta, and I had to go to Dallas. And so I'm like, what the hell? Why don't I just call my mom and meet my mom? And I met her for dinner one night. And at dinner, we hit it off. And she said, your brother-in-law is a shaman, and his name is Don Javier. And he's apprenticed with another shaman and a sorcerer named Don Juan Matus. Now, I knew of Don Juan Matus because Wayne Dyer, who I was already following since the early 90s, often talked about Don Juan Matus. When my mom told me that my brother-in-law, Don Javier, who I had not met, had apprenticed with Don Juan Matus, candidly, there was a fair amount of skepticism. There was a fair amount of, I don't know if I believe that or not. I don't know what I think about that. And even as I say that, I think back to a story that I heard from Wayne Dyer a couple of years prior to that. And the whole moral of that story is be careful what you believe, because when the truth comes knocking, you're not going to recognize it. I didn't really vehemently disbelieve it. I just didn't know how much I did believe it, but I went along with it. And so I said, Mom, can you take me? I want to meet him. Is it possible to meet him on this trip? I'm leaving tomorrow. Can I meet him? So my mom called my sister, her daughter, and said, hey, I'm here with your brother, who my sister had at least been alerted to. So I went over to their house that night. It was an apartment, a very tiny apartment. And he came down from the loft, and he had just finished a journey, and he gave me a necklace. And he said, here, this belongs to you. I'm supposed to give this to you. And it was a necklace that I'm under the impression was created by Don Juan or Doña Maria Sabina. It was a very, very, very old necklace that I still have to today. But let me go to Don Javier for a minute. As a boy, he met Don Juan Matus, and he started working with Don Juan Matus as a small boy. And he knew a lady in Oaxaca, Mexico named Connie Mendez, who was a metaphysician. You can even buy her books now, and they're I guess like 50 years old. But Connie Menendez knew Don Javier, and Don Javier, of course, was working with Don Juan. But Connie Menendez also knew a graduate student that was visiting Oaxaca who was looking for Don Juan, and his name was Carlos Castaneda. And right there, that might ring some bells for some of you guys, because some of you are like, well, yes, of course I know the teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda, which has sold like 20 million copies around the world. And quite literally, they're iconic books. And there's a lot of debate about them over the years. But have you ever wondered why Castaneda was never in public? Interesting. I'll talk more about that. But anyway, Connie asked Don Javier, well, he's just a boy, Javier at that time, can you introduce Carlos to Don Juan? And Javier said, well, I don't know. I'll ask. And by the way, I'm conveying this story the best I remember it or best I understand it. So Connie said, can you introduce Carlos Castaneda to Don Juan? And Javier said, I'll ask. Javier said he asked Don Juan, and Don Juan said, no, he's not on my path. No, I'm not interested. And as I understand, then Don Juan did not meet with Carlos Castaneda. So Carlos Castaneda then asked Don Javier, can you help me with what you know about Don Juan? Don Javier asked Don Juan, well, can I recount, can I answer questions? And Don Juan said, whatever you wish. He's not on my path. I don't care. Do whatever you want to do. And so Don Javier helped Carlos Castaneda pen the first, I believe it was 4 books, Journey to Ixtlan, The Teachings of Don Juan, etc. And Don Javier worked with Don Juan until he was, I believe, about 19 years old. And around that time, and I may have this a little mixed up, again, I've not been told this story in 20 years, but there was a certain point, and there's a lot I can go into, and I'm cutting out like 99% of it, but there was a point where Don Juan said, it's time for you to go in the world, and Don Javier's words were to be a man, to carve your own path, to live your own life. And Javier is a very shrewd businessman. He enjoys business as a game. And he did extremely, extremely well in the business world. And he did that for many years till he was about 40. And when he turned 40, he was directed back to get on the path again as a shaman and as a healer. And he had to give up everything. He and my sister had to give up everything. And as I said, he was a very shrewd and very smart businessman, and he had to give it all up. And he had no money. He and my sister had to call my mom and say, hey, can you send this bus fare? We have no money. Can you send this bus fare to get to Dallas? And then he started building, by word of mouth, building his I don't know the right word, but people would come to him for healing. And now it's literally today, his list is like 800 people long. Now I want to step back here. I remember the first time I sat in presence with Don Juan was in 1996. And Don Juan came through Don Javier, who's a medium. And when Don Javier is a medium, he doesn't know what's happening. It's not like, who's that medium, Abraham, Esther Hicks, where she's present and animated and all that. He's completely just gone. He doesn't even know what happened. And Don Juan came and he talked to me. This was the first time in 1996. And he said something to me that I want to share. He said to me, he goes, you think too much. And when you think too much, you make yourself heavy. And when you make yourself heavy, you cannot fly. And what he was telling me is stop being so logical. Stop thinking so much. Because, I mean, come on, for crying out loud, I'm a college graduate. I went to a good private school. Of course I can think. And I got good grades and I got rewarded for that. But let me tell you where my first epiphany happened. And then I want to start sharing some experiences with Don Javier. So I'd always remembered that Don Juan told me that I think too much and I'm too logical. And then I think back, and it dawned on me one day that in the first book, The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda, at the end of the book is an appendix that is extremely logical. And in that moment, it dawned on me that if Castaneda were truly a student of Don Juan's, he never would have been that logical. Because Don Javier, even today, never, and I mean, he is a logical person, but he's always and constantly and incessantly go beyond the mind, go beyond the mind, go beyond logic. And if Castaneda were ever the actual student, he never would have been the logical person to be able to write the book that logically. Therefore, ostensibly, he was not the student, which gave validity to the assertion that Don Javier was the actual student. And I saw many other instances after that, and I'll share some things with you, not related to Don Juan per se, but my work with Don Javier. And I think even you will find perhaps some interest here, some curiosity, but maybe some illumination as to what's possible for you and available for you. Don Javier works with the elements, earth, wind, fire, and water, and air. When he works with people, helping them heal their luminous body and evolve and grow, I've worked with him now since 1996. What he does is he uses what's called candle work, fire. And there's herbs involved and water involved, earth, wind, fire, water, and air. And so when I started working with him, he gave me the instructions. And he said, okay, here's your list of instructions, and you have to take a bath for 9 days. And when I asked him about that, I don't fully recall why he told me the 9 days, but he does everything by 3, 6, and 9. Tesla said, if you want to understand the keys to the universe, it's 3, 6, and 9. So he does everything by 3, 6, and 9. But if I remember correctly, it was something along the lines of aligning your electromagnetics to a higher frequency with the earth or something like that. When you take these baths, you have to do them every single day for 9 days. You cannot have, after your bath, any kind of sexual intimacy whatsoever. And in the bath water, you have to put elements in the water. And he told me things like, okay, you have to find dirt that literally was a mile within where you grew up. So where you grew up, get dirt, like at least a pound of it, get dirt from there. And then you have to have all these herbs. And he had like 10 different herbs. And then you have to have tree bark. And I remember him telling me about the tree bark. He said, get the tree bark literally like less than a mile from where you live now. And I remember him telling me this and just kind of thinking. And then he stopped and he goes, and ask before you take the bark from the tree. And I was like, what do you mean ask? I didn't say this to Don Javier, but what do you mean ask? And so that was my beginning with him. When I started the 9 days, I don't remember if it was day number 1 when I did the baths or day number 9 when I started the cycle of candles. Because after the 9 days, then he has you burn configurations of candles, 7-day candles, the Mexican type candles you see in the Mexican marts that are the tall ones that burn, well, they used to for 7 days. And you would do them in various colors and configurations, and you would have bowls of water around them and glasses of water and herbs and different things. And he would always give me instructions, which he still does today, for what my assignments will be. Every month I get them, a 4-week sequence, and then I do the month, and then I get more candles. And he's always working on something with you energetically. But I remember he said, and I don't know if it was the night of my first bath or the first night after the 9 days, but he said, because he called me on the phone, and he goes, if I hit you too hard, let me know tomorrow. At about 3 o'clock that morning, I woke up and I've never done cocaine before, but I woke up like I've seen in the movies, people doing cocaine and they want to just literally put a new roof on a house and they want to run a marathon and all these kind of things, you know? So I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I want to run a marathon at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I remember a dream that I had. And in that dream, we were dressed in Roman garb, he and I. And he walked up like a Roman soldier to me, and I recognized it was Javier. I knew it was him. And he had this really long spear. And what he did is I kind of like, hey, how you doing? You know, all friendly. And he took the spear and stabbed me right in the heart and killed me. And I watched myself die in that dream. I had always read, I didn't know if it was true or not, that you do not and cannot die in your dreams. But anyway, I died in that dream. And then as the dream continued, he literally, I don't remember the exact placement of him, but what he did is, or somehow a curtain got pulled open and he was standing on the other side of the curtain. And he said to me very poignantly, see, I told you, death is an illusion. Nothing dies. It is not real. And over the years, I have had thousands of awarenesses and epiphanies and lessons like that. I remember one time I was traveling from Atlanta to New York City, and I'm always doing my spiritual work when I'm with Don Javier. I shouldn't even say that. I've always done it for decades now. And I remember that I checked into a hotel in Richmond, Virginia. And by the way, the shamans don't teach analytically. They teach in dream time. They teach beyond words. They teach in the ethers. They teach in the dimensions. And in this dream, Mother Teresa was sitting across from me. And I just recognized something after all these years. It was Doña Maria disguised as Mother Teresa. I never caught that until just now. So Doña Maria was sitting across from me at this little bitty table, and there were two number 2 pencils sitting on the table. And what happened is I had my hands on the table, and she had her hands on the table, and the pencils started rising and spinning in the air. I didn't say anything, and she didn't say anything. And then the pencils very gently kept spinning, and then just literally landed on the table and stopped spinning. And what she said to me was, see, I told you, everything is moved with your mind. She got up and she left. I didn't say anything. So, as I mentioned, he's always bringing lessons in the dream time. And as a matter of fact, this day and age, when I need help on something, like right now today, literally today that I'm recording this, I need some help on something business related. And I texted him, and I'm like, can you talk tonight? But if I need something simple and I've got a more complex question I want to share with him and ask him, and candidly, it is about the podcast and it's about Ini, but I want to get his feedback on what I should do with the podcast. But if it's something simple, I will simply text him and say, hey, here's the situation. And he will say, okay, I will satellite the answer back to you. Meaning, just be alert, be aware, be intuitive, and let me send that energetically back to you and you'll get the answer. But many times it's in dream time because I am, as we all are, we're dreamers, but I've developed the gift over the years to know how to pull and how to decipher the dreams for the messages that I need. So I remember some lessons, some things. I want to share some things over the years. We were doing ceremony. And by the way, we have done ceremony inside Cheops, the Great Pyramid, Machu Picchu, Isla del Sol, Chaco Canyon, Haleakala, and many, many power spots around the world. I know at Teotihuacan, we were allowed, as I mentioned before, by the president of Mexico to do ceremony in Teotihuacan. My family was allowed 2 nights unsupervised in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, and ceremony was done there. But we were doing ceremony in a small town in Arizona, and we lived in Dallas, and we had to come to this location to do ceremony. And I remember in dream time that night that it was a very dimly lit room in dream time. And I remember in this dimly lit room, he was standing across from me, maybe 10 feet from me. This was about 20 years ago. And as I was looking at him about 10 feet from me, by the way, in my physical body, I'm not a screamer. I don't scream at people. I don't yell at people. It's just not part of my nature. But in this dream, I was screaming at him. And I was screaming, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. And that in itself is so not like me, the 3D ego, Jim, the bag of skin, the container. And I was saying, I hate you. I hate you. And as I was saying that, the smoke screen came up between us, and then the smoke screen dissipated, and he was gone, but I was looking in the mirror. And I recognized in that moment, he was being the mirror for me to see how I was feeling about myself and treating myself. And over the decades, I've had many, many thousands of scenarios and stories like that have brought epiphanies to me and awareness and all kinds of learning and knowing. And I bring a lot of that to you guys in the podcast, but I don't tell you where it came from, but that's where it comes from. But I want to share some other stories with you here, some very 3D things that I'll share to just kind of give you a glimpse into my world with Don Javier. It was Mexico, 1996. We were doing a sacred journey at Chichen Itza. There was like 20 of us there, and there were several of us that got pretty messed up on really cheap tequila. And I know I've told this story in the podcast before, but I don't think I told all the story. Maybe I did, I don't know. We were drinking cheap tequila, and the next day we were driving to Tulum. And it was one of those days in Mexico that's really hot and really humid, and you're by the water. And I mean, I was having kind of like the dry heaves and the sweats, and like I feel really bad. And we have a 4-seat passenger, a 4 bench van, passenger van, and he's in the very back seat, and I'm in the third row of seats. And I felt so bad. I said, I'm going to just leave my body till I get there. But I didn't say it verbally. I simply thought it. And the second I thought that, all he did, tap, 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 tap me on the shoulder and goes, get back in your body. There's time for that later. I remember thinking, I didn't say anything. How could he possibly know this? But he can read your mind. And I one time asked him, I'm like, can you read people's minds? And he's like, yeah, when I'm in close proximity to them, I can literally not only read what's in their conscious mind, many times I can read what's in their subconscious mind. Now, also I want to share that, and he's demonstrated that to me, because there's things he said to me that I have thought. There was no way, no probing, no cold reading, no way he could have known, and he can repeat it back to me verbatim. But my point was, I've never seen him use that in any kind of abusive way against anyone at any point, at any time, anywhere. He just doesn't do it, and he keeps it all private. When I lived in New York City, back to the candles again. One morning, I woke up and my candles were literally, before I went to bed, one of my candles had broken. And I'm like, I need to put this out before I go to bed so it's not a fire hazard. And I had it inside another glass container in case the 7-day candle broke, it wouldn't be a fire danger. So I had it inside a bigger glass container. And it broke, and I said, I probably need to blow it out tonight. I tried to blow it out, and it went out, and then it relit. And I'm like, oh, the hell with it. I'm going to bed. Next morning, I woke up and that candle was still burning. But not only was it still burning, it was like a factory smokestack with dark smoke coming, funneling up out of my candle. And I'm like, holy mackerel, if my roommate sees this, he had his own bedroom across the apartment in New York. We were on different sides of the building. In our apartment, we had a 3-bedroom apartment. But I'm like, if my roommate sees this, he's going to have a cow. So I ran to the kitchen sink and got a glass of water, and I poured it into my candle, and it literally shot flames like a bazooka, like a flamethrower up my wall. And it was my altar. I had pictures on the altar. It burned it all. I was literally in a panic. I did it again, and the same thing happened again. And so I called his house that day at noon, and my sister answered, and she thought I was calling because they had dinner with somebody I was very close to. And I heard him say in the background, and I know I've mentioned this in the podcast before, I heard him say in the background, no, he wants to know what happened to his candles last night. Mind you, there's no way he could have known. Zero, because I did not tell him. So he called me, and he jokingly says, cuñado, which is brother-in-law, what happened? And that kind of just, kind of like prompting voice. And I said, you know what happened? And he said, yeah. And he goes, I didn't want to do it, but they made me do it. And he said, we've been trying to get your attention for a while. Now, he goes, I got your attention in a way that you cannot explain, which with your logical 3D mind, you cannot rationalize this away. I need to talk to you about some things you need to do. And that's when I went to Peru with him, a couple of months later. So, that was another example of him. I'll give you another example that just dawned on my mind. Also burning candles and configurations. When I moved to New York City, I got really distracted from my spiritual work. I was like a kid in a candy store in New York, paying very little attention to my spiritual work. And I came home from work one day, and these candles, the 7-day candles, you let them burn 24/7 until they burn out. But again, the 7-day candles, I would have inside a bigger container in case the 7-day candle broke. It wasn't a fire hazard. So I came home from work, and all of my candles were put out. And I'm like, what the hell? Why are my candles out? And I called my sister, and she goes, well, let me ask him. And now I just text him directly, but in the past, I'd always call her first. And she said, well, let me ask him. And he said, you are not being serious about your spiritual work, and it's going to be taken away from you until you become serious about it again. So in that moment, I recognized I need to realign myself. I'm out of alignment. And about 3 months later, he called and goes, okay, it's time for you to start candle work again. Now, that particular story, I had not even thought about it in years. I want to go back to 2012. I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and I was driving home. I was on the North Dallas Tollway driving home. And 2 exits from my house, I started feeling some tingling in my left arm and in my left jaw. And I didn't know what it was, but I thought, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. And as I'm driving home, I literally also live a block from the fire station. I called him and I got his voicemail, and I just said, hey, Don, I'm having a heart attack. I'm driving to the fire station. Literally, because I just got off the tollway, you can't pull off. I just pulled off the tollway. I'm driving like 2 blocks away to the fire station, and my cell phone rings, and he says, you're not having a heart attack. I'm like, yes, I am. Don, I'm having a heart attack. And he's like, no, you're not having a heart attack. He goes, I already looked. You're fine. Go home. I'm like, I'm not going home. I'm having a heart attack. And he goes, fine. If you want to go to the ER to give yourself peace of mind, they're going to probe. They're going to stick pins in you. They're going to send you home at 3 a.m. They'll find nothing wrong with you. Or you can go home and rest and you'll be fine. Well, I didn't go to the ER. I went home and rested. The next day, I went to my acupuncturist. He put some pins in my right shin, and it felt like somebody hit me with a sledgehammer in my right leg. And my acupuncturist said, that's how much energy you had trapped up in your left shoulder. So it wasn't a heart attack. It was the energy trapped in my meridians in my body. Don Javier could see that. There were other times that I can't share. Many significant times of things that I've seen. But I will share one more. There was, living here in Sedona. Sedona is known as the home of the ancient ones. And there's a lot of nighttime activity in Sedona. When I say nighttime activity, I mean what people would call extraterrestrial, which, by the way, doesn't exist. Meaning, do beings from other galaxies and universes exist? Absolutely. Are they extraterrestrial? I guess by definition, yes, but we're all part of the same universe and universe is. So we're all the same. But I was walking out to take my trash out and I didn't see it, but I saw it when Don Javier pointed it out. But when he was visiting before he moved here, out in front of my house was a big mountain. And in that mountain, he goes, "Do you see that up there?" And there's like this big cutout space in the mountain. And I said, "Yeah." And it looked like somebody carved it out. It looked like a big doorway in a mountain. He goes, "That's a Stargate." And by the way, I have been with him to the Stargate in Peru. You can look it up online. Not our trip to Peru, but the Stargate. But he goes, "That's a Stargate." So I was walking my trash out to the curb one night. And as I'm walking back down my driveway, I see this fluorescent green light come down out of the sky, and it comes down as precisely as a laser. I mean, it wasn't like a flare that was all jagged, and it was bright. I mean, it was like a luminescent green. It was crazy luminescent green and very thin and coming down in a straight line, and it disappeared into the mountain. Now, I know Don Javier, and I know if you ask half-assed questions, you're going to get a half-assed answer. And I said, "Hey, I just saw something outside, blah, blah, blah." He didn't get back to me. And I said, "Hey, I know that you're not going to get back to me unless I ask. I just saw something. It looked like beings. It looked like not from this planet." I'll put it that way, okay? Put it simply. And he said to me, and I won't tell you all of what he said, but he said, "Yes." And okay, so I said, could everyone see that? And he goes, "No." He goes, "You saw that in the fifth dimension." He goes, "You had that ability until you turned about 5, where you could see into the fifth dimension. And then when you turned about 5 or so, you lost that. And now that gift is coming back to you." And basically what he said was, without going into too much detail, those are beings that are coming to assist transitions that are happening on the planet. And he said, "I've been working with them for quite some time." And he gave me some specific numbers I won't share here. But he goes, "I've been working with them for a very specific amount of time, and here's what we're doing." And then he kind of jokingly finished with, "Well, how about that?" So over the years, I've had exposure to many, many, many things like this. And he's opened up many doors to knowledge and physics and the history of humanity and the times humans have been on planet, even the role that AI is playing now, how humans have used AI in past epochs of human history to destroy humanity. He's brought a lot of understanding about the concept of time, universes, multiple dimensions, multi-dimensions, alternative realities, non-ordinary realities, dream time, awarenesses in dream time, awarenesses out of dream time, and the list goes on. And this has been my life now for 28 years, and I bring it to you guys. But I don't share all this because I want to make it as practical as I can. And part of me is like, if I go too deep with people, I'm going to lose them. Plus, I'm kind of limited in what I can share. But I remember one time I said, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, I said, "Don, how did you become a shaman?" And I texted him that. And I might have even read that text here on the pod. But he said, "Anima Mundi." And the point is, when you can merge with all life on the planet. And notice what a lot of you are doing right now. You're thinking about merging with all life on the planet, but not even thinking the planet is something you want to merge with as well, because Pachamama, Mother Earth, is alive. It is an organism. And he's like, when you learn to, my word's going to be commune, but when you learn to, I forgot what he had said, but basically merge with all that is becomes available to you. And for you listening, the way that we cut ourselves off is that we get into our ego, we get into our logic, which is where I started. And in that moment, we get into our logic, and that literally separates us from observation of the world. Because when we get into our logic, we start analyzing the world as opposed to observing the world. And the merging is in the observation, not the analysis. I know I would not be in my life where I am today without his guidance, his support, his awareness, his mentorship, his unconditional love, his kindness, his compassion, and basically him showing the way for the path that we're on. So the awarenesses that I have developed that I bring to you guys, I attribute it to thank you to him because he's helped me open and further develop my awarenesses to bring things to you guys. And I had a guy, as I said, maybe 6 months ago telling me, well, I shouldn't talk about him and I should own it as my own. Absolutely incorrect. I'm not owning it as my own because nothing is my own. This is not my own. I'm being the medium for this, but he's the catalyst. He's the dynamo. He's the powerhouse and the energy behind me that brings the awarenesses so I can bring things to you guys. Over the years, I've developed a lot of skills, and one of my predominant skills is clairsentience, meaning I can feel, which is one of the reasons I've done so well in coaching. Because when I'm coaching people, I can feel their heart. I can feel their fears. I can feel what's going on with them. And I automatically know how to coach them based upon what I can feel. But every one of you listening right now, you have extrasensory gifts, but you have to get out of the way. You have to move the ego out of the way, open up and expand yourself, merge with Anima Mundi, merge, and that's where the knowing at a much deeper level comes. Okay, I want to go to the transformational takeaways, but on the Secret podcast, I want to continue with one more story that I did not tell in the public episode about a trip to Peru that I went on with Don Javier. And that's when I recognized that beings of higher ability can infiltrate your thinking. Literally, they can pervade and infiltrate and even plant thoughts in your mind from being an external, being another being. And I'll tell that story on the Secret podcast. Okay, so your transformational takeaway is understand, based upon some of the things that I shared, is that we're living in a very mega limited reality when we try to function from our 3D analysis analytical mind. That keeps us trapped in our 3D reality. And what we want is we want to merge with all that is Anima Mundi. And the way to do that is to humble ourselves, to let go, less attachment, less ego, and more opening our heart and more loving. And, I've been reluctant to share a lot of this, and I wanted to share even more because one of the biggest lessons that I'm still assimilating from him is that we know nothing. He told me the day that Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad became Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad were the day that they realized they knew nothing. And I even started crafting a podcast, which I have partly written and bulleted out. But the conundrum is to say that I know nothing means that I know enough to say that I don't know nothing, which means I know something, which then means it's not true that I don't know anything. So it's kind of like a cone. You can't get out of it. That's why I've not created an episode on it. But I'll simplify this. The more you stop thinking you know everything and you've got everything figured out, and that reminds me of Neil Donald Walsh when he was on Good Morning America. He was telling me when I interviewed him about God is it's not like you have it figured out. And even Don Juan told me that once. He goes, the life that you live is not like you have it figured out. So we analytically think we have it figured out. And candidly, not only do we not have it figured out, we're lost and we don't even know that we're lost. So thank you for listening to this episode. And so now I've shared who Don Javier is, his relationship to me, how I know him, and a little bit of my experience with him. Hopefully you found some great value here for you and some things that you can use for your own transformation from the inside out. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you over on another episode. Bye-bye.